We are recording this podcast on the lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. We wish to pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging, and extend our respects to any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander people who may be listening.
Hello and welcome to Novel Feelings, where two psychologists take a deep dive into your favorite books. I'm Priscilla.
And I'm Elise. And today we're really excited to present an interview with Sara Shepard, author of the new Penny Draws series. A little bit about Sara. So Sara Shepard graduated from NYU and has an MFA from Brooklyn College. She's the author of two New York Times best-selling series, Pretty Little Liars, which I'm sure you've all heard about, as well as The Lying Game and The Perfectionists.
We're going to tell you about the first book in the Penny Draws series, which is Penny Draws a Best Friend. Nobody said starting 5th grade would be easy, and Penny's anxiety means a million questions are always spinning through her thoughts. Luckily, she's got a lot to look forward to, like her favorite after-school activity, art club, and seeing her best friend Violet again after spending the whole summer apart. The thing is, Violet has been acting weird since she got back. She never wants to hang out anymore, says art class is for babies, and spends all her time with Riley, the meanest girl in school. Did Penny do something wrong? And if she did, can she undo it?
Plus, the sequel to the book is out as well, which is Penny Draws a School Play, recently released, where Penny and her friends are starring in a school play, which has a whole other range of anxieties associated with it. And so this is going to be part of a broader Penny Draws series as well. So we're talking a little bit about the first two books in the series today.
Yeah, and thank you to Text Publishing for linking us and Sara together. Before we get started on our interview, here are our usual disclaimers. We are trained psychologists, but this podcast should not be taken as direct therapeutic advice. Please consult a professional for more specific and tailored advice. And as this is a children's book, we haven't split this interview into non-spoiler versus spoiler section like we normally do. But instead, we talk more about the writing process and the representation of anxiety in the books in general.
And a couple of quick content notes. So today, some of the topics that come up include anxiety in children, school counselling, and shifting friendships. All right, so let's get started with our interview with Sara. Sara, thank you so much for joining us today on your Friday night and our Saturday morning. How are you going?
I am doing well. Thank you for having me.
Our absolute pleasure. So we're really excited today to be talking a little bit more about the Penny series. So the Penny Draws series, being a children's series, is a little bit of a departure from the mystery and whodunit young adult books that you're most well known for. Can you tell us about what gave you the idea to write Penny's story?
Well, yes, most of the time I am writing for young adults. But for a long time, I have wanted to write a sort of elementary age, middle grade novel. And they have kids who are around that age, and I really wanted to do something special for them and just couldn't come up with an idea and didn't want to force it. But then COVID happened, and my kids were both at home, and everybody was very anxious. And I remember being anxious as a kid and kind of started thinking about writing a book that had a bit to do with anxiety, but in a fun kind of way, in a light kind of way. And, started playing around with that and drawings and the things that my kids were worried about. And because their worries had sort of exploded since being in this lockdown and the news being everywhere and all of that stuff. And it kind of came out of that. And I didn't, force the story. And I'm glad that I didn't try to come up with some sort of story before Penny was ready to come. But yeah, I would say it mostly came out of that. And it came out of the fact that I was an anxious kid as well. And very much like Penny when I was growing up, I had a lot of somewhat irrational things that I worried about and some very real things that I worried about.
But they don't feel irrational at the time.
No. They absolutely do not. The dog eating the TV remote and then worried that the remote has rearranged itself in his stomach and is going to change the channels when he rolls over, like was a total worry that I had as a kid. And, and I see that in my kids too, that they worry about things that don't make a lot of sense, but make sense to them. And, it's just about having a sense of control in a world that like was not making a lot of sense at the time. Yeah.
I'm obviously not a primary school kid anymore, but it still, Penny's anxiety still feels really relatable. One of my irrational worries as a child, we still had cassette tapes back then, and I thought every time I played it, the singer would have to sing it all over again. And I was like, oh, I'm tiring out the singer.
That's so much work for them.
I know.
It's kind of adorable.
I love that.
So in the book, Penny doesn't actually call it anxiety, as she doesn't have that language yet, but it is clear from the writing that she has a tendency to ruminate and worry a lot. We would love to dive into this a little bit more. How did you approach writing about anxiety for a younger audience? Writing a book with mental health themes without it being heavy-handed or being an issues book, so to speak?
Yeah, I mean, right. Penny, she does not call it anxiety. She just sort of calls it her worries. And in the same way, she speaks to a therapist at school, but she calls her therapist her feelings teacher because she has big feelings, and you need to talk about those big feelings. And I guess I thought about how I was trying to handle it with my own kids, as far as not, being super serious about, oh, this is anxiety and this, you have this condition and all those things, and sort of how I remember dealing with it when I was young, as far as like writing down all of my lists of worries, and but just making it kind of fun and for kids to read about, but also relatable. But in the end, it is trying to normalize worries and anxieties, because it just seemed like every parent that I spoke with, their children were having things that they worried about kind of intensely in some cases. And I think kids feel like they're a bit alone in feeling that way. And when I was young, I definitely felt like I was alone in the things that I worried about and having anxiety and it keeping me up at night, and everybody else was just coasting through and just kind of figured it out. And that's something that I say in my school presentations, because I go to a lot of schools and I ask kids, who worries about things? And all the hands go up. And, it's like, no, not a single hand is down. And and I say, do you sometimes feel like you're the only one that worries about things? And all the hands go up. So it's kind of that. It's sort of normalizing it, but also making it a fun story so that kids don't feel like they're being taught a lesson, or being, in the guidance counselor's office, like, having a little, learning something. It's more just making, this is a fun character. She's a lot like you. She's doing school stuff, but you may find that you can relate to the way that she worries about things.
I often, because I work with children as well, and often they might make comments about, no one else feels like this, or I feel really weird. And I'm on the other side thinking, if you were the only one who had these feelings, I wouldn't be this busy.
Why do I have so many referrals?
Yeah, but it has been, I guess it's the combination of COVID and our increasing awareness about mental health means that a lot more children or a lot more parents are seeking help for their children's mental health. So it's both worrying that children are dealing with so much anxiety these days, but it's also a good sign that people are more willing to look for that help.
Yeah, I mean, in the same with my kids. I mean, when I tried to get them set up with a therapist outside school to talk about, especially my younger son worried about a lot of, didn't want to be left alone, just had a lot of anxiety that, I thought it would be good for him to talk about somebody. There was a waiting list. I mean, it was very hard to find somebody and get an appointment. And luckily he did. And she was really helpful, and it was great. But I think you're right. I think a lot of parents are realizing that this is just a great thing they can do for their kids, and a great resource, and their kids get a lot of benefit from it.
Do you think that kids' understanding of anxiety has changed since you were a child yourself?
Yeah, I think kids have more language around it. You know, when I was young, I don't think I knew the word anxiety unless like my parents were joking about it for themselves or something, because my mom is also very anxious, and you know, she would, oh, my anxiety. And there was this old advertisement in the States that it was for this these like bath salts or something, and it was called Calgon. It was in the bath. It was like, Calgon, take me away. I'm just going to get into the bath, and all of my worries are going to melt away. And so they would say that a lot. But like, I didn't understand. I thought this was a big person problem, not a young person problem, because what did we have to worry about? You know, our lives were easy, and you know, we just had to go to school and like didn't have to work and worry about things and whatever. So that's what it felt like to me growing up. I can't speak for like everybody, but that's what it felt like for me. But I think these days, I think we recognize that there are a lot of things that kids face, and you know, that's even something that I kind of tackled with Pretty Little Liars, just with the internet and, you know, sort of the anonymous judgment that comes through text messages and social media and internet, and you know, cyberbullying and all of that. I think that led to a whole new age of anxiousness and mental health issues that also we didn't have to deal with. So like, you know, it's kind of a trade-off of parents kind of not taking you seriously back then, but then again, I think I would have had a really hard time with social media. I think there was a period when social media like appeared and parents weren't on top of it. And I think parents are now kind of starting to understand like, oh, this is like, this can be really damaging for kids. So yeah, I think it's kind of, it can even out in a way, but there are a lot of things for kids to worry about these days, for sure.
Yeah. I feel that there was almost a bit of a increase in literacy and understanding. If I had to pinpoint it, it's very difficult to sort of put in a year when people started to talk about it more. But I know for me, it wasn't until I was maybe in my late teens, in sort of the late 2000s, that I even heard terms like depression or anxiety for the first time, and then sort of started to retrofit those and go, oh, that's what I was going through at certain time points. And then I think like in the last 10 to 15 years or so, we are talking about it a lot more, but there's still a lot of conversations that are not always that helpful when it comes to children's and young people's mental health. So yeah, I mean, again, we never expect everyone to be an expert on it, but it is interesting to witness just how times change and how we understand things, and the language we put against certain experiences changes. So I feel like people talk a lot more about kids' anxiety, and I don't really know if kids are actually more anxious than they used to be, or if we're just better at recognizing worries for, you know, what they are, and better able to recognize and equip children to manage those.
It's hard to know. I'm trying to think about, you know, a lot of friends that I had when I was young, and I think we were all really anxious too, you know, or depressed, or, I mean, I feel like I knew, but it just was not talked about. It was not, it was not treated. It was not recognized. And I had a friend when I was in high school, so this was in the 90s, who was diagnosed with ADHD, which is, you know, something that no one should be ashamed of or anything, like, you know, but at the time it was this sort of shameful thing of like, I have to take this medication, and, you know, it means that there's something wrong with me, and very different way of talking about that now, but it's interesting to look back on that and think like, oh wow. That's just a shame, kind of, that and then there was the time before that where there was no diagnosis, so it's an ongoing
kids are just labeled as being naughty or disruptive with
right or head in the clouds, or which they had no help. So
hopefully we're moving in the right direction.
Hopefully.
You've already mentioned a bit about how some of your own experiences with anxiety inspired Penny. How much of Penny is you, and how much of Penny's personality is unique to her?
Penny is somewhat unique to her, but there definitely is a lot of me and my family in Penny. And I can't say it's just me. I can say it's a little bit my mom. I can say it's a little bit my kids. But there's a lot of all of us that I bring into Penny. But there's also just a little bit of Penny, and especially how she grows and what she learns and all of those things that is unique to her, because she definitely comes a long way. Even in the first book, just kind of realizing and accepting herself, and kind of going on a friendship journey, and she learns a lot, and that is uniquely her. But there's definitely a lot of me and my kids in Penny too.
And you just touched on this as the focus, I guess, on the friendships changing throughout the books. So throughout the first two books in particular, the first book, Penny Draws a Best Friend, Penny does go through a shift in friendships and ends up finding her people, I suppose, by the end of the first book. Can you talk us through Penny's journey with her friendships and what that looked like?
So Penny, I feel like this happens to a lot of kids, especially girls. I mean, I can only speak from my experience growing up, but you have your close friend or your close friend groups, but once you get a little bit older, things might start to shift, and people don't want to be friends with people so much anymore. And the person who is left is kind of confused and as to why, and thinks it's all their fault. And sometimes it's not. It has nothing to do with them. And that's sort of the state Penny is left in. And she spends a lot of time trying to be something that she's not for this friend of hers. And she kind of learns that she doesn't have to do that. And that actually leads to problems sometimes. But it's definitely, in talking to parents and dealing with my own kids, that's something that and my own experience. It's something that I went through with friendships, and, it's hard. It's hard when friend groups change, and hard when you kind of have to pick up the pieces and try to find new friends and start over. And I think that is a big source of anxiety and depression and all of that in kids, and it's uncertainty and all that, because friends, especially as kids get older, are so important, and sometimes more important than parents and families and whatever. So I just feel like friendship was a really natural thing to talk about in the Penny stories, because we're all trying to figure out, what makes a good friend? Who are the right friends for us? Is this friend that I've had for a bunch of years, like, still working for me? And how to go through, a friendship breakup, kind of. And, this person wants to be friends with this other group, and I'm not included, and what that looks like. And luckily Penny has somebody she can talk to. And I always say that to kids too, find somebody that you can talk to. Doesn't have to be your parents, but just somebody that you can, get these feelings out. And luckily she has that person, but she still tries to figure it out on her own, and doesn't make all the right choices always. But it's a hard thing. It's a hard thing. Seems like everybody has to go through.
I feel like one thing was standing out to me in what you were talking there is the idea of friendship breakups, and it just makes me think of how little conversation we have about friendship breakups versus relationship or romantic relationship breakups, despite how common they are and how impactful they can be. I know myself, I went through a pretty nasty, well, it felt nasty. It wasn't actually that dramatic, but friendship breakup when I started secondary school, and I don't know what the US equivalent is, but our version of year 7,
middle school.
Entering middle school, that's right. And my best friend, since I was 3 or 4, basically told me she didn't want to hang out with me anymore. And that was pretty brutal.
Yeah.
I think one moment that got me in the feels in the first book was when Violet turns around and said, well, you worry too much. And that's why I don't want to be friends with you. And I'm like, oh, no.
I know. And I've been on the other side of it. I had a friend and we ended up becoming friends again. But like when we were in, I don't know, 9th grade or something, I decided I didn't want to be friends with her. And it was more because she was like possessive, and there were real reasons.
Yeah.
I had real reasons, but I didn't communicate it very well. I didn't say like, hey, like you kind of get really mad at me for reasons like I don't understand. So instead I just stopped being friends with her. And I think that's the other problem, is that we, kids often don't have the language to like have these real conversations with their friends, of saying like, listen, this hurts me. And I kind of try to do that in the Penny books as well, as try to have kids really kind of talk to each other. And hopefully that, as a model for readers of like, you can say this to your friend. Like they might be kind of shocked that you're being honest with them. But, I know that led to me feeling really bad for just dropping this friend. And I think my friend was so confused because she didn't understand it. And, I think years later, we started talking again, and I did kind of explain it, and it was kind of like, oh, but it would have, maybe we would have been able to stay friends had I known to be honest, or known how to say those things, or, I feel like that's another really scary territory is having those hard conversations.
And I think a lot of adults don't have.
No, I mean, right.
Well.
Right. No, we don't. And with friends, I mean, yes, there are definitely friendships that I've let go, or that people have let, and come in and out of my life. And it's sort of like, wonder what happened there. And like,
yeah, I think there's a difference between friendships that just sort of naturally drift apart and those where one person knows that something isn't working and something happens, but it's not quite an explicit, hey, you're not setting the right boundaries, or you're not being a very good friend to me right at the moment. Like we don't often have those explicit conversations. There's a lot of resentment that can build up, and we just don't know how to talk about it a lot of the time.
I know.
So yeah, it's kind of nice to see in the second book that there might be some hope for the friendship between Penny and Violet, even though it might not look exactly how it used to be. But, there might be still something there.
I don't want to give away too much, but I've actually written quite a few other Penny books because it was on such a tight schedule. There is more that they do work out a little bit more of their friendship. And again, it doesn't look the same, but Violet, it's sort of a to be continued.
I'm very curious.
Yeah.
So we just pivoting back to the anxiety topic again. Obviously, throughout Penny's journey, we see a lot of her different experiences with anxiety and worrying. What would you like young readers or families to take away from the Penny series in terms of the depiction of anxiety?
Mostly that they're not alone in feeling like this, because I feel like when you have that sort of anxious feeling and everyone around you is playing or just talking and just going about their lives, you feel like it feels very isolating. But just to know that a lot of people go through this and you're not the only one, and to take care of those feelings and recognize them and try to work through them. I think something that I did when I was young that I didn't even know I was doing as sort of a self-care was I kept a lot of journals, and I wrote down a lot of feelings, and because I didn't see a therapist or anything like that. I mean, it just was not a thing that people did. But I did keep a lot of journals. I loved writing. I mean, that's mostly what I did is I would write creatively and write stories, whatever. But more as I got into middle school and high school, I would just write down thoughts and kind of frustrations and, stuff that I was thinking. And I think that really helped.
Such a good way to process what you're feeling.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's one suggestion but that doesn't work for everybody. But yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of the thing that works for you to help get those feelings out and manage them and think about them. And also to talk to somebody too, and feel somebody that you trust. And, I know once kids do get a little older, 12, 11, 12, 13, you don't want to talk to your parents. And I understand that. And, I have a 12-year-old now, and I totally understand that he probably doesn't want to tell me everything, and that's like embarrassing. But if there is somebody that when things do feel, like you really need to get something out, if there is somebody that you feel like you can go to, that person, they're not going to be angry that you came to them, or they're going to appreciate you getting that out, and you'll feel better in the long run. So basically that, just to kind of normalize anxiety, that it's something that lots of people go through.
Well, hopefully the books will find their ways to kids who need to hear that message.
I hope so too.
Yeah. Speaking about talking to someone, though, we, being mental health professionals, particularly love Penny's relationship with the school counselor, who she calls, as we said before, the feelings teacher. And this feelings teacher helps Penny manage her anxiety, but definitely is not a miracle worker. There was a panel, I think, on one of the pages where she asked, what's been going on, Penny? And there was this image of her just like on the edge, and then she just vomited everything out. Yeah.
Everything.
Yeah. I really love the little comics on the pages. Yeah.
Oh, the illustrations are so good.
Yeah. How did you approach writing the school counselor or any of the other adults in the novel?
The school counselor I certainly didn't base it on any school counselor that I had growing up. We didn't really have one. No fault to my schools. It just was not, really something that we had. I guess I kind of based it on them. I also reached out to my kid's school counselor and had her read it and just say, is this the appropriate language? Is this the thing that, is this something the counselor would ask? Are these the right things? Does this make sense? So she was a huge resource and continues to be. So, she's not a miracle worker. She can't solve all of Penny's problems. She can make suggestions, and certainly is this kind of oasis for Penny to kind of like little safe haven, for her to go to when she is feeling overwhelmed. And sometimes that's all Penny needs. And sometimes she feels like her feelings teacher doesn't give her good advice at all, but it isn't for the feelings teacher to tell her what to do. It's just for her to kind of help navigate her feelings. And that kind of continues on in future books where, she bounces her feelings off of the feelings teacher, but it's not like she turns around and tells Penny, okay, this is my prescription for you. You should go out and do this. Sometimes she makes suggestions, but like she doesn't, it's not an assignment or anything like that.
Which I feel is quite accurate to real life and how.
Good. I mean, I think that's the guidance that I got from my counselor is, you just kind of have to navigate the feelings, but not like tell. And even my experience with therapists, like as much as you want to go into there and for them to tell you, like, just tell me what to do. Like, that's not That's
Yeah.
their role.
I don't know about you, Priscilla, but I've definitely had clients tell me, like,
Yeah.
what would you do? Just tell me what to do
know.
or what to think. And I'm like, that's actually not my role.
That's not, nope, that's not my job. Yeah. So there was that. But then, yeah, there are a lot of other fun adults in the book. Penny's parents. I hope that, parents will read Penny's parents and kind of identify with them. I'm sometimes feeling overwhelmed and frustrated themselves. And so they're often kind of a source of comedy in the books. And, they try to help, but again, like sometimes they're overbearing and but they love, they love their kids, and obviously they're trying their best.
Yeah.
And there are some teachers that, especially in the second book, Penny gets a new teacher named Miss Kettle, who I think she's in the second book, right? She has the puppet.
Yes, she does.
Yes, she has like kind of her puppet that she speaks through, and she has a little bit of anxiety as well, and we kind of find that out. So they're all kind of, parents will see it, but I hope kids see it too. That like, just because you're an adult doesn't mean you have it all figured out. And I've loved writing about all of these characters. They've been so much fun, and I think part of the fun is drawing them. But I've just had a lot of fun writing these adult characters in the eyes of Penny, but also knowing that adults will read these characters and kind of understand, like, okay, I can see that. I can see that in me.
It's definitely fun reading them as an adult. Just sort of seeing it through the child's eyes, but understanding what the adult is probably going through or thinking or feeling at that time.
Yeah. The second book, like the parents, they move to a new house, and the dad is all, inspired to build this tree house, and the mother is, Penny's mom is just like, this is a disaster. Like, this is not going to go well. And it's just cute. It's, their parents as well. And it's just been fun to kind of bring in all these different adults in Penny's world. And they mean different things to her, and they provide different things for her. So
when I was reading this first book, I remember messaging Elise because I worked out what the mystery was that Penny was worried about. Yeah. And I was like, I know what's going on. And then I was like, of course, I am an adult reading a book for children. I got there a lot faster than Penny did.
As in Penny, what was happening with Penny's mum, right?
Yes, that one.
Yeah. But I think some kids guess it too. I think it depends on what they've experienced in their own house. It's like, I know what that's, but some kids didn't get it until later.
Yeah. But that was fun. Even that was fun for me as well as a reader.
Yeah.
I'm not very good at guessing the conclusions to mysteries, so when I do get it correct, I feel like I need to register it in advance and then tell everybody that I correctly guessed it. So even in a children's book.
Totally.
So there are, of course, already 2 books out in the Penny series, with a third on its way. Can you tell us a little bit about what to expect from Penny Draws a Secret Adventure?
Yes. Speaking of mysteries, it's a little bit of a mystery. There is kind of a secret box that Penny finds in her attic because she has moved into a new house, and the previous owners have left some things behind, and she finds this box, and inside the box is this sort of surprise that takes Penny and her friends on this like treasure hunt kind of. And so that's been really fun. I mean, that kind of allowed me to have a little bit of a mystery from my mystery writing days, and to lay in some clues and they kind of go on this treasure hunt. But it's a lot about there's a lot about old friendships that they figure out, and sort of Penny finds out a lot about her new neighborhood and her community, and sort of some people in her community, and she learns kind of not to judge people maybe by how they look on the outside. And of course she has some friendship drama because she worries this time that in the second book, she was worried that her new friend Chloe and her less new friend Maria would not get along, and she didn't know how to merge the friend groups. And in the next book, she's a little worried that Maria and Chloe are getting along a little too well, and she doesn't want to be left behind because she's, still pretty upset from what happened, with Violet leaving her behind. So that, didn't happen that long ago. So it's a lot of that. It was, again, such a fun book to write, and there's a lot of silliness in it, and yeah, just like they just go on this sort of fun adventure that takes them to a lot of different places and meeting a lot of interesting people.
Oh, lovely. You mentioned that there are quite a few Penny books written already. How many have you planned for the series?
Yeah, give us the
numbers. So I have 6 planned. Well, I actually don't have the sixth book planned yet, but I have written up to the 5th book. In the 4th book, they go on a class trip, and in the 5th book, it's like a sports. They start a sports team. They play pickleball, which is very popular here. All of a sudden, do you know what pickleball is? Is pickleball like a universal?
I've heard of it, but not. Yeah, I don't think it's an Australian thing.
Yeah, it's like tennis, except the paddles they're like played with paddles, like almost ping pong paddles kind of, but the ball is bigger and you kind of run around like I don't know. It's fun. Yeah. So they start this team, and it's a lot of it's Penny's anxiety about sports, which I think a lot of kids will identify with, because I think sports is a sore spot for a great thing for some kids, but I mean, there's always a lot of pressure around sports, no matter if you're good at it or if you're not so good at it. There's a lot of fraught feelings.
No shortage of things to be worried about, is there?
No, yeah, and the class trip, one is very fun too. They go to New York, which I lived in New York for a long time, and so it was fun to draw some of those settings and make them go to some of those locations, and it's been really fun.
Oh, lovely.
I think that brings us to the end of the interview. It's been really wonderful to hear a little bit more about the book and your intentions for the future, and thank you so much for joining us, Sara. It's been an absolute pleasure.
This was so nice. Thank you. I had a really nice time talking about Penny.
That wraps us up for today. Thank you so much for listening. Remember to check out our show notes on our website for Sara's website, social media, and other information.
If you like us, please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Find us on novelfeelings.com or on Instagram, Twitter, The Storygraph, and Goodreads via novel_feelings.
You can also find my Bookstagram at Paved with Books with an extra S.
And thank you to Sara once again for the interview. It was really wonderful. All right, take care, everyone. Bye.
Bye.